The ground simply vanishes without warning. We are about to journey through the 33 strangest sinkhole stories from across the United States, tales that reveal the awesome power lurking just beneath our feet. These are not merely holes in the ground, but portals to scenes of bizarre fortune and profound loss. You will hear about priceless cars swallowed by a museum, entire neighborhoods vanishing into the earth, and prehistoric secrets unlocked by a collapsing world. How does a quiet street suddenly become the edge of an abyss, and what forgotten histories are buried in these sudden pits? By the end, you will understand the unseen forces that shape our landscape in the most dramatic ways imaginable. What does it feel like to have the world literally drop out from under you? The silence of a museum before opening hours is a fragile thing. On the morning of February 12, 2014, that silence inside the National Corvette Museum in Bowling Green, Kentucky, was shattered by a deep, grinding roar from below. Security cameras captured the moment the skydome floor gave way, a section of concrete and earth collapsing into a gaping void. When the dust settled, a cavernous sinkhole, some 40 feet across and 30 feet deep, had opened in the very heart of the temple to an American automotive icon. The earth had swallowed 8 priceless Corvettes, from a 1962 model to a $1 million prototype. The world watched in stunned disbelief, the story captivating not just car lovers but anyone who could imagine such a bizarre and specific disaster. This was not a random event, but a geological inevitability waiting for its moment. The entire region sits atop a vast karst landscape, a terrain defined by soluble bedrock like limestone. Over millennia, groundwater had slowly dissolved the rock, creating a network of hidden caves and tunnels. The museum, unknowingly, had built its showroom directly over one of these subterranean cavities. The recovery operation was a monumental task, a multi-million-dollar effort involving engineers and geologists who carefully extracted the mangled vehicles from their earthen tomb. Some cars were twisted beyond recognition, heartbreaking relics of the collapse. Yet, in a testament to their legacy, several were meticulously restored and returned to display. The sinkhole itself now a permanent part of the museum's story, a stark reminder that the ground we build upon is not always as solid as it seems. While the Corvette Museum collapse was a dramatic loss of automotive history, another sinkhole in Florida took a far wider and more terrifying bite out of the modern world. In May of 1981, in the upscale community of Winter Park, a small, curious depression opened in the earth. It was easy to ignore at first, just a dip in the ground. But this was no simple settling of soil. Over the next 24 hours, that small dip transformed into a roaring, collapsing chasm. The ground groaned and buckled, consuming everything in its path with a terrifying, unstoppable hunger. It swallowed a house whole, the structure simply vanishing into the abyss. It devoured several Porsches from a local dealership, the luxury cars becoming offerings to the earth. An entire municipal swimming pool, drained in a desperate attempt to slow the growth, was itself consumed along with massive sections of a city street. By the time the collapse finally stopped, the hole was an astonishing 320 feet wide and 90 feet deep. This was the Winter Park Sinkhole, a void so vast it was soon nicknamed Lake Rose after the woman whose property was at its center. The cause was the same dissolving limestone that underlies much of Florida, a bedrock that can give way without a moment's notice. The sinkhole became an instant, bizarre spectacle, drawing crowds of tourists who came to stare into the sheer, raw power of the planet. Eventually, the city decided to fill the chasm with water, permanently transforming a neighborhood disaster into a serene, man-made lake, a beautiful and permanent scar on the landscape. The earth did more than just swallow a few cars in Winter Park. It permanently erased a piece of a neighborhood. But what happens when the collapse is not a single dramatic event, but a slow, creeping disaster that forces an entire town to abandon its home? In the quiet, swampy community of Bayou Corne, Louisiana, the first sign of trouble arrived in the summer of 2012. Residents began noticing strange bubbles rising in the local waterways, the water itself seeming to boil with an unseen force. A foul, rotten egg odor, the distinct smell of natural gas, began to permeate the air. The ground was groaning and no one knew why. The answer, when it came, was terrifying. A massive underground cavern, a hollowed-out space within a giant salt dome used by a mining company for brine extraction, had catastrophically collapsed. This was not a natural sinkhole in the traditional sense, but an industrial one, a man-made cavity that had given way. The result was a growing, toxic chasm that began swallowing 100-year-old cypress trees and belching methane and crude oil from deep underground. The state issued a mandatory evacuation order for the 350 residents of Bayou Corne, a directive that was supposed to last for months but would ultimately become permanent. The sinkhole continued to grow for years, a bubbling, oily lake of industrial waste that consumed over 30 acres. It became the scene of a protracted environmental and legal nightmare, with the responsible company facing lawsuits and a massive cleanup operation that continues to this day. Bayou Corne stands as a stark, sobering lesson in what can happen when industrial ambition meets a fragile, subterranean landscape, a ghost town created not by economic decline, but by the ground literally dissolving beneath it. The industrial landscape of Daisetta, Texas, offered no protection from the Earth's sudden betrayal. In May of 2008, residents of this small town witnessed the ground open up into a monster, a sinkhole that would eventually stretch 600 feet across and plunge 150 feet straight down. It was a chasm born from the very industry that defined the region, a sprawling collapse that voraciously consumed the machinery of modern life. Oil storage tanks, pipelines, and telephone poles were all dragged into the deepening pit, their twisted remains creating a surreal, industrial graveyard at the bottom. The sinkhole did not just swallow dirt, it swallowed the town's economic backbone, presenting a terrifying spectacle of a landscape literally eating itself. Yet the people of Daisetta responded with a resilience that was as unique as the disaster itself. Instead of simply fearing the void, they found a way to live alongside it. They began hosting fishing tournaments in the murky water that accumulated at the bottom, transforming a symbol of destruction into an unlikely community attraction. For a time, the massive crater became a local curiosity, a place where people could come and peer into the sheer, raw power that had reshaped their world. But this strange new landmark came with a heavy cost. The environmental concerns were profound, as the sinkhole had ingested a cocktail of hazardous materials from the swallowed equipment, creating a long-term threat to the local groundwater. The story of Daisetta is a powerful paradox, a community's defiant attempt to reclaim a disaster, all while living with the lingering consequences of what lies buried beneath. A quiet farm in Gorby, Maryland, became the epicenter of a different kind of disaster in 2022, one that grew with such alarming speed it earned a local nickname, the Gollywhopper. It began as a small depression in a cornfield, a subtle dip that a farmer might normally dismiss. But within days, that dip was a widening chasm, a gaping mouth in the earth that expanded relentlessly, chewing through soil and threatening to swallow nearby barns and tractors. The ground seemed to be melting away from the inside out, a silent, voracious collapse that left the community in awe and fear. Geologists were called in to solve the mystery of the Gollywhopper's terrifying appetite. Their investigation revealed a hidden world beneath the fields, a labyrinth of ancient underground streams that had spent centuries dissolving the soft limestone bedrock. This was not a single cavity, but a complex, interconnected network of tunnels and voids, a fragile honeycomb that had finally reached its breaking point under the weight of the surface world. The entire farm was perched precariously over this unseen river system, and the sinkhole was simply the roof caving in. Facing the potential loss of vast stretches of farmland, the community rallied. A massive operation was launched to fill the monstrous void, a delicate process that involved pumping thousands of tons of a special grout mixture deep into the underground cavities to stabilize the land from the bottom up. It was a race against time and the earth itself, an effort to plug the holes in a sinking world and reclaim the ground that had so suddenly betrayed them. The ground beneath a home in Seffner, Florida, offered no warning on the night of February 28, 2013. While the family slept, a silent collapse began directly under the bedroom of 36-year-old Jeff Bush. His brother, Jeremy, was jolted awake by a loud crash and his brother's screaming cry for help. Rushing to the room, Jeremy found a scene of unimaginable horror. The entire bedroom floor was gone, replaced by a gaping, 20-foot-wide hole that seemed to swallow all light and sound. All that remained of Jeff's bed was a single corner of the mattress, teetering on the edge of the abyss. Without a thought for his own safety, Jeremy leaped into the dark pit, desperately clawing at the crumbling dirt and debris, trying to find his brother. Rescue crews arrived within minutes, but they immediately recognized the extreme danger. The entire house was structurally unsound, a fragile shell poised over an active, unstable sinkhole. For hours, engineers and first workers used sensitive listening devices, hoping to detect any sign of life from the depths. They found only an unsettling silence. The rescue mission soon became a recovery effort and then a declaration. The county made the heartbreaking decision to designate the property a grave site, leaving Jeff Bush's body entombed within the earth that had so suddenly taken him. The house was later demolished and the sinkhole filled in, a quiet, solemn patch of ground marking a profound personal tragedy. This event struck a deep chord of fear throughout Florida's Sinkhole Alley, a stark reminder that the very foundation of a home, the place meant to be safest, can be an illusion. It is a sobering reality that beneath the sunshine and suburban streets, the ground can simply open up and take everything without a sound. The sudden loss of a home and a life in Seffner is a deeply personal tragedy, but these collapses can also paralyze an entire nation. The interstate highway system, the concrete backbone of American travel, is not immune to the ground giving way. In the mountains of Colorado, a section of Interstate 70, a vital coast-to-coast artery, was abruptly severed. A massive sinkhole, some 40 feet wide and 30 feet deep, opened up in the westbound lanes near the town of Gypsum. The cause was not natural limestone, but a forgotten relic of the state's history. Deep beneath the pavement lay an abandoned coal mine shaft, a hollow space from a bygone era that had finally surrendered to the weight of modern traffic. The collapse was instantaneous and total, creating a jagged gash in the road that stranded thousands of travelers and forced a complete shutdown of the highway. The engineering challenge was immense. Crews could not simply fill the hole with dirt. They had to first map the full extent of the unstable mine workings below, and then pump in thousands of cubic yards of a special, fast-setting concrete to create a stable foundation before the road itself could be rebuilt. For days, this critical link in the national transportation network was broken, a stark demonstration of how our modern infrastructure is built upon a past that can sometimes crumble. Hundreds of miles to the northwest, another interstate was about to reveal a different kind of secret. In Spokane, Washington, a routine repaving project on Interstate 90 was underway when the ground made a different decision. Workers were preparing the roadbed when the pavement suddenly sagged, then collapsed into a void no one knew existed. This was not a mine shaft, but a vast, natural limestone cavern that had remained completely hidden, its roof just feet below the surface of one of the state's busiest highways. The discovery brought traffic to a standstill for months, not days. Engineers were faced with a monumental puzzle. They had to first determine the full size of the cavern, which was far larger than the initial hole suggested, and then devise a way to support the entire interstate above it. The solution was as massive as the problem. crews filled the enormous cavern with a lightweight concrete foam, a staggering volume of material to permanently plug the emptiness beneath the road. The Spokane sinkhole was a chilling reminder that our most traveled corridors are often just a thin shell over a hidden and unpredictable world, a world that can announce its presence with a sudden, traffic-stopping roar. The same geological forces can create eerily similar scenes a world apart. In May of 2010, a staggering sinkhole opened in Guatemala City, a near-perfect cylindrical pit that dropped 30 stories deep and swallowed an entire 3-story factory. Just weeks later, a smaller but hauntingly identical sinkhole appeared thousands of miles away in Winter Haven, Florida. This one opened in a residential area, a stark, circular chasm that consumed a massive oak tree and a large section of earth, stopping just short of a nearby home. The resemblance was uncanny, both holes displaying the same clean, almost machined walls. The cause in both cases was not natural limestone erosion, but the failure of man-made pipes. A ruptured sewer line in Winter Haven had acted like a fire hose, relentlessly washing away the sandy soil beneath the surface until the ground could no longer support its own weight. It was a terrifying demonstration of how our own infrastructure, when it fails, can replicate the most dramatic and destructive forces of nature right in our own backyards. The Florida replica served as a stark, local warning about the hidden vulnerabilities buried just beneath the pavement and pipes of modern life. But what happens when the industrial legacy is not a broken pipe, but a landscape deliberately hollowed out? Just a short drive away in Mulberry, Florida, the ground gave a different answer. In 2016, at a former phosphate mine that had been reclaimed and turned into a public park, the earth simply opened up. A massive sinkhole, 300 feet wide and 50 feet deep, appeared without warning, swallowing everything above it. This was not a simple case of erosion, but a collapse of the mine's very foundation. Phosphate mining creates vast underground cavities filled with a watery, sandy byproduct known as process water. The liner containing this toxic slurry had failed, allowing the material to drain out and creating a void that the surface layer then plummeted into. The new chasm did not just swallow dirt, it drained over 200 million gallons of that radioactive, chemically laden water directly into the Floridan aquifer, the primary source of drinking water for millions of people. The Mulberry sinkhole exposed a terrifying truth about reclaimed industrial land, that the surface can be beautifully landscaped and labeled a park, while beneath it, a volatile and unstable legacy waits for its moment to collapse, posing a silent threat to the very water we drink. Among the 8 Corvettes dragged into the Kentucky abyss, one legendary car was conspicuously absent. The 1 millionth Corvette ever produced, a pristine white convertible, should have been a centerpiece of the Skydome display. Yet, just days before the floor gave way, this priceless automotive icon was moved. It had been loaded onto a truck and shipped to a Chevrolet facility in Michigan for a scheduled marketing event, a routine trip that became a miraculous escape. The timing was so perfect it sparked whispers of a strange curse, a bizarre twist of fate that seemed to single out the other cars for destruction while sparing this one. Its survival instantly transformed the 1 millionth Corvette from a celebrated milestone into a living legend, a tangible story of what could have been. Today, it is often displayed alongside the mangled, restored wrecks of its less fortunate siblings, a powerful exhibit showcasing 2 dramatically different fates. The rescued cars tell a story of loss and rebirth, but the survivor tells a story of impossible luck, a narrative that has only deepened its mystique and skyrocketed its value, making it one of the most famous and fortunate Corvettes in the world. Florida holds a sinkhole that became a living museum. The Devil's Millhopper, just outside Gainesville, is a colossal, 120-foot deep funnel carved into the earth, a state geological site that feels more like a portal to another world. Unlike the sudden, destructive collapses we have seen, this is an ancient formation. its walls layered with fossil shark teeth and the bones of long-extinct animals, a natural history book written in stone. But its true magic lies in the life it sustains. As you descend the long staircase into its depths, the air grows cool and damp. A miniature rainforest thrives at the bottom, a unique microclimate created by the sinkhole's depth and the constant trickle of small streams down its mossy walls. This sheltered environment supports a community of lush ferns, rare orchids, and animals like the squirrel tree frog, species typically found in more tropical, wetter regions of the state but surviving here in this secluded pit. The formation's eerie name comes from local lore, a blend of pioneer imagination and native myth. Early settlers thought its shape resembled a hopper, the funnel used to feed grain into a mill. They spun tales suggesting the devil used it to drag unfortunate souls down into the earth, their stories likely echoing much older Native American legends that spoke of this place as a powerful and spiritual entrance to the underworld. Today, the Devil's Millhopper stands not as a scene of disaster, but as a protected ecological sanctuary, a breathtaking reminder that some sinkholes are not endings but beginnings for entirely new worlds. Far from the industrial collapses and suburban tragedies, some sinkholes are born as stunning natural wonders. On the coast of Oman lies the Bima Sinkhole, known locally as Hawiyat Najm, which translates to the falling star. This breathtaking turquoise pool is a massive, water-filled crater set dramatically against the desert landscape. Local legend insists it was created by a meteorite's impact, a piece of the heavens crashing to Earth. Geologists, however, point to a more terrestrial origin, a classic limestone collapse where the roof of an underground cavern gave way. The result is the same, a beautiful, inviting oasis that has become a major tourist attraction where visitors can swim in its clear, saline waters. This same enchanting transformation happens much closer to home. In Florida's Ocala National Forest, you can find a near-perfect cousin to the Amani Wonder, a place called the Devil's Den. This is a water-filled sinkhole, but with a spectacular twist. The collapse did not open to the sky, but instead created a massive underground cavern with a small opening at the surface. Sunlight streams through this opening, illuminating a prehistoric spring so clear and pristine it feels like another world. The formation process for both is fundamentally the same, groundwater slowly dissolving soft limestone bedrock over millennia until the ceiling can no longer hold, creating a sudden void. Whether open to the desert sun or hidden beneath a forest floor, these geological accidents become serene, picturesque swimming holes. They blend raw geological power with local myth and human recreation, transforming a potential disaster into a destination of profound beauty. It is a powerful reminder that the same force that can swallow a house can also, under the right conditions, create a paradise. The collapse at Bayou Corne was not a simple act of nature, but a slow-motion industrial catastrophe with a clear and startling cause. Deep beneath the swamp, the Texas Brine Company operated a massive cavern hollowed out within the Napoleonville Salt Dome. This was not a natural cave, but a man-made void created by pumping high-pressure water into the salt layer to extract brine. The cavern itself was a staggering 110 feet in diameter and stretched over a mile deep, a colossal empty space that acted like a subterranean balloon. The failure began when the immense pressure inside the cavern, combined with the natural buoyancy of the salt, caused the surrounding rock to fracture. This breach allowed the cavern's contents to escape, migrating upwards and destabilizing the entire geological column above it. The ground, now unsupported, began to slump and collapse into the newly formed void, creating the ever-widening, toxic sinkhole. For months, residents had reported the very warning signs of this impending disaster. The mysterious bubbles in the bayou were methane gas, released from a previously trapped pocket and forced to the surface by the shifting geology underground. The foul odor and tremors were all part of the same violent reorganization of the earth, a direct result of the cavern's failure. Despite these clear distress signals from the planet, the full scale of the threat was not officially acknowledged until the sinkhole itself appeared, swallowing the landscape whole. The legal and environmental aftermath has been as vast as the sinkhole itself. Texas Brine ultimately paid over $150 million in a class action settlement with the displaced residents and continues to fund the massive environmental monitoring operation. This includes an extensive network of gas monitors and ground movement sensors that watch the still unstable area, a permanent technological scar on the community. But no settlement could ever repair the profound psychological toll on the people of Bayou Corne. They were not just evacuated, they were permanently severed from their homes, their history, and their way of life. The community, once a tight-knit enclave of multi-generational families, was scattered across the state, its social fabric torn apart by the chasm that consumed its physical heart. Bayou Corne is now a modern ghost town, a quiet, empty space where the sounds of the swamp are no longer punctuated by human life, a solemn memorial to a home that was literally pulled out from under the feet of those who loved it. The financial shockwave from the Winter Park sinkhole was as deep as the chasm itself. Initial insurance claims soared into the $4 million range, a staggering sum in 1981, covering the loss of the home, the cars, the swimming pool, and the ruined infrastructure. But the true cost did not end with the initial collapse. Engineers quickly determined that filling the monstrous hole with dirt and rock would be prohibitively expensive and technically fraught, a multi-million-dollar endeavor with no guarantee of success. The ground was too unstable, the void too vast. Faced with this impossible bill, the city of Winter Park made a decision that would permanently alter its landscape. They chose to let the sinkhole fill with water, transforming a disaster zone into a serene 40-million-gallon lake. This creative solution saved the city a fortune, but it came with a hidden economic toll. For years, property values in the immediate area stagnated or fell, the very ground beneath homes now viewed with suspicion. The psychological impact on the real estate market was profound, a lingering fear that any patch of Florida earth could be the next to give way. This single event fundamentally changed how Florida managed its subterranean risk. It spurred the state to mandate more rigorous geological surveys before new construction, forcing developers to prove the ground was stable. Building codes were strengthened, requiring deeper pilings and specialized engineering in areas identified as high risk. The Winter Park sinkhole did more than swallow a neighborhood, it forced an entire state to look down. It put Florida's sinkhole problem squarely on the national map, transforming a local geological curiosity into a recognized and feared peril that would shape insurance policies and urban planning for decades to come. The very ground designed to contain industrial waste became its conduit. In late August of 2016, at a Mosaic fertilizer plant in Mulberry, Florida, a massive sinkhole tore opened directly beneath a phosphogypsum stack. These gypstacks are mountainous piles of radioactive waste material, a byproduct of creating phosphate fertilizer. The hole was not a small crack, but a chasm over 200 feet wide, and it punched straight through the bottom of the stack's massive holding pond. In a relentless, silent torrent, 215 million gallons of processed water poured into the abyss. This was not clean water. It was a toxic, slightly radioactive slurry laden with sulfur, ammonia, and heavy metals like arsenic and lead, and it was flowing directly into the Floridan aquifer, the primary source of drinking water for millions of Floridians. The risks were immediate and terrifying. This contamination threatened to poison a vast underground river system, potentially seeping into private wells and public water supplies for generations. The cleanup effort launched by Mosaic was monumental, a desperate attempt to contain the invisible spill. The company began pumping contaminated water out of the aquifer, treating it, and then reusing it in their process, a cycle meant to prevent the plume from spreading further. They installed dozens of monitoring wells to track the pollution's movement, a vast subterranean surveillance network. Yet this response was haunted by a critical delay. The public was not informed of the disaster for nearly 3 weeks, a silence that sparked outrage and deep distrust. The incident ignited a fierce and ongoing debate about the fundamental safety of storing such hazardous industrial waste in a state built on porous limestone. How can you safely contain a mountain of toxic material when the very foundation beneath it is Swiss cheese, riddled with cavities and tunnels that can collapse without warning? Critics argue that placing gypstacks in Florida is a geological inevitability waiting to happen, a dangerous gamble with the state's most vital resource. The industry points to improved liners and monitoring, but the question remains, is any container truly secure when the floor can simply vanish? The same ground that holds up a suburban dream can also betray it with terrifying speed. In the quiet community of Land O'Lakes, Florida, a Friday morning in July 2017 began with a simple call about a small depression in a backyard. Within hours, that subtle dip exploded into a full-blown catastrophe. The sinkhole grew with a ravenous intensity, its gaping maw consuming one home, then a second, pulling entire structures into the earth as firefighters and news helicopters looked on in helpless disbelief. Dramatic footage captured the surreal collapse, showing sections of rooftops and walls tilting and vanishing into a cloud of dust and debris. The ground was not just sinking, it was actively eating the neighborhood. Authorities had no choice but to issue an immediate, mandatory evacuation for dozens of surrounding homes. The fear of the sinkhole spread, turning a peaceful street into a disaster zone in a matter of hours. The event was a brutal reminder that in Florida, safety is often just an illusion, a thin layer of grass and soil over an unseen world of dissolving limestone. But what happens when the threat does not arrive with a dramatic roar, but with a slow, creeping dread? Just 2 years later, and a short drive away in Spring Hill, residents faced that very nightmare. A sinkhole began to form in early 2019, not in a sudden collapse but as a persistent, widening crack in the earth. For weeks, this fissure grew, inching its way across a residential yard, a silent, unstoppable force that gradually undermined the foundations of 2 homes. Engineers monitored the slow-motion disaster daily, their instruments tracking the ground's subtle shifts as families watched from a distance, powerless to stop the inevitable. There was no single catastrophic moment to capture on camera, only the agonizing suspense of a home becoming progressively more unsafe, its fate sealed by the patient, grinding work of geology. In the end, both houses were deemed total losses, condemned and abandoned before the earth could swallow them whole. The Spring Hill sinkhole showcased a different kind of terror, the psychological torment of a threat you can see coming, a crack in your world that widens with every passing day, forcing you to leave behind everything you built. The same geological forces that create terrifying chasms can also carve out pools of breathtaking beauty. On the campus of the University of Montevallo in Alabama, the earth opens up not as a threat but as an invitation. This is the Montevallo Blue Hole, a flooded sinkhole renowned for its almost supernatural, vivid blue water and astonishing clarity. Fed by a natural spring that bubbles up from the aquifer below, the water remains a constant, cool temperature year-round, creating a popular swimming spot that feels like a hidden oasis. But the sheer depth and the way light filters through the water give the blue hole its legendary color, a deep, mesmerizing azure that seems to pull your gaze down into its tranquil heart. Yet, such a beautiful and mysterious place inevitably collects its share of ghost stories. Campus legend whispers of a heartbroken student from decades past who drowned in the sinkhole, her spirit said to linger near the water's edge. Some students claim to have seen a lonely female figure in old-fashioned clothing wandering nearby, a spectral presence forever tied to the tranquil blue waters. These tales are likely fueled by the sinkhole's inherent mystery, a deep, dark pool that guards its secrets as closely as any haunted house. The science behind this beauty is as fascinating as the lore. The water is so remarkably clear because it is filtered through miles of limestone aquifer, a natural purification process that removes sediment and impurities. This filtration leaves the water pristinely transparent, while the depth and the way water molecules absorb and scatter sunlight create that signature, intense blue hue. The Montevallo Blue Hole stands as a perfect example of nature's dual personality, a serene and stunning sanctuary born from the exact same violent process of collapse that can swallow homes and highways. It is a place where geology and ghost story, science and superstition blend together into a single, unforgettable pool of blue. That decision to embrace the disaster became a masterstroke of resilience. Instead of hiding the scar, the National Corvette Museum chose to make it the centerpiece of an entirely new exhibit, a permanent memorial to the day the Earth opened up. They constructed a dramatic viewing platform that allows visitors to peer directly into a preserved section of the sinkhole, its raw, earthen walls a stark contrast to the polished floors of the showroom. Suspended above the void are the very cars that were recovered, the mangled remains of 8 Corvettes displayed exactly as they were pulled from the pit. Seeing the twisted metal and shattered fiberglass hanging there is a visceral experience, a silent testament to the raw power that was unleashed beneath the museum. This is not a collection of ruined cars, it is a story of impact and survival. The exhibit is a powerful, ongoing lesson in geology, with clear explanations of the karst landscape and how hidden caves can lead to such sudden collapses. It transformed a multi-million-dollar catastrophe into the museum's single biggest attraction, drawing crowds who come not just for the cars, but for the story of the sinkhole itself. The museum did not just rebuild, it evolved, weaving the narrative of loss and recovery directly into its identity. It stands as a brilliant example of how to face a disaster, not with denial, but with a defiant curiosity that educates and inspires every person who walks across that platform and looks down into the depths. Sometimes the Earth opens up to reveal a lost world. In Alton, Illinois, a massive sinkhole known as the Sink Pit became an accidental time capsule, preserving a stunningly complete record of the last ice age. This was not just a hole in the ground, but a deep, natural trap that accumulated the bones of ancient giants for thousands of years. When scientists began their excavation, they unearthed a prehistoric graveyard, a jumbled mass of skeletons from mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and dire wolves. These animals had come to the sinkhole seeking water, only to become trapped in its steep, muddy walls, their remains perfectly preserved in the cool, oxygen-deprived sediment at the bottom. This fossil trove provides a crystal-clear snapshot of a vibrant ecosystem that thrived in the region over 15,000 years ago, a world of immense creatures that roamed a landscape very different from the one we know today. The sink pit did not just swallow animals, it swallowed a chapter of natural history, holding it safely underground until we were ready to uncover it. Far to the south of Alton, another set of sinkholes holds clues to the fate of an entire human civilization. Surrounding the Cahokia Mounds, the site of the largest pre-Columbian city north of Mexico, are numerous water-filled sinkholes known as sediment traps. For archaeologists, these are not mere ponds, but invaluable archives. The layers of silt and pollen that have settled at the bottom of these sinkholes over centuries create a perfect chronological record of the local environment. By extracting core samples from the muck, scientists can read this history like a book, analyzing ancient pollen grains to understand what plants were growing at different periods. This research has revealed a dramatic story of climate change coinciding with Cahokia's peak population around the year 1000. The data suggests that the region experienced a prolonged period of heavy rainfall and flooding, which would have devastated the agricultural fields that fed the massive city. Following this wet period, the climate then shifted to extended droughts, placing even greater strain on food and water supplies. The sinkholes, therefore, tell a tale of a powerful civilization potentially brought to its knees by a 1-2 punch of environmental crises, first too much water, then not enough. These quiet, water-filled depressions in the landscape have become key to understanding why a great city, home to tens of thousands of people, was eventually abandoned, its mighty mounds left silent against the Midwestern sky. While the sinkholes of Cahokia held silent water, some American chasms hold a far more volatile secret, a flickering subterranean fire. These are our own, smaller versions of Turkmenistan's famed Darvaza gas crater, the so-called door to hell where the earth does not just open but breathes flames. One such place is the burning mine fire near Carbondale, Pennsylvania, a coal seam fire that has been smoldering underground for decades. The fire itself was ignited in a forgotten coal mine, but its heat and gases often vent to the surface through sinkholes and fissures that collapse into the burning tunnels below. These vents become natural chimneys, spewing toxic fumes and sometimes even visible flames, creating an eerie, hellscape glow on the mountainside, especially at night. The science behind these fiery pits is a simple but dangerous chain reaction. In areas with coal deposits or natural gas pockets, a spark or lightning strike can ignite the flammable material. Once lit, these subterranean fires are nearly impossible to extinguish, burning for years with a relentless, slow hunger. They consume the coal or gas from within, creating voids that cause the ground above to collapse, which in turn opens new vents that feed the fire with fresh oxygen. This creates a vicious, self-sustaining cycle of collapse and combustion. The dangers are profound. The ground near these burning sinkholes can be treacherously unstable, with hidden cavities and sudden collapses a constant risk. The air is filled with carbon monoxide and other lethal gases, creating an invisible, odorless threat to anyone who ventures too close. In a residential setting, a methane leak from a rotting landfill or a broken gas line can find its way into a newly formed sinkhole, and a single spark can transform a simple ground collapse into a roaring, flaming pit in someone's backyard. These burning sinkholes are a stark reminder that the forces beneath our feet are not just solid and silent, but can be volatile and fiery, turning a geological oddity into a permanent, open wound on the landscape. The monster that tore through Daisetta never truly left. That initial 600-foot wide chasm, born from the collapse of a salt dome cavern, has become a permanent and defining feature of the town's landscape. For over a decade, state and local agencies have kept a constant, watchful eye on the massive hole, employing sophisticated equipment to monitor for even the slightest shift or expansion. While the dramatic growth has ceased, the ground remains a living entity, subtly settling and reminding everyone that the event is not a closed chapter, but an ongoing reality. A strange and unexpected ecosystem has taken root in the depths of this industrial wound. The water that accumulated at the bottom, a mix of rainwater and groundwater, has transformed the crater into an accidental wetland. Birds now nest on its steep, earthen ledges, and hardy vegetation has begun to creep down its sides. A slow, green reclamation of a man-made scar. The twisted remains of oil derricks and storage tanks, once symbols of loss, now serve as surreal, rusting habitats for this new life. The community's relationship with the sinkhole is a masterclass in Texan resilience, forged with a heavy dose of dark humor. In the years following the collapse, the town famously hosted fishing tournaments right there at the crater's edge, a defiant act of normalcy in the face of the absurd. While the fishing has since been discontinued for safety reasons, that spirit remains. The sinkhole is simply part of the town now, a bizarre landmark that everyone knows and everyone has a story about. You do not live next to a feature this large without developing a unique kind of kinship, a shared, wry acknowledgement of the giant pit in your collective backyard. It is a testament to a community that looked into the abyss and decided to give it a nickname and a place in their history. The ground beneath a quiet Chicago suburb offered no hint of the chaos to come. In the village of Northbrook, a peaceful neighborhood street suddenly became the scene of a startling collapse when a massive sinkhole, nearly 50 feet across, opened up without warning. This was not the limestone country of Florida or Kentucky, but the seemingly stable Midwest, a place where such events were considered unthinkable. The culprit was not natural geology, but a critical failure of the man-made world below. An aging 100-year-old storm sewer pipe, a relic of the town's infrastructure, had finally given way. For decades, this brick-lined tunnel had channeled rainwater, but time and pressure had weakened its structure. When it ruptured, the escaping water acted like a powerful subterranean fire hose, relentlessly washing away the soil and clay that supported the road above. The street did not just crack, it imploded, creating a cavernous void that swallowed pavement and threatened nearby homes. The event was a stark reminder that sinkholes are not always a force of distant, wild nature, but can be born from the slow decay of the systems we build our lives upon, even in the most unexpected places. 1,000 miles to the southwest, the sun-baked earth of the Arizona desert tells a different, yet equally surprising story. In the town of Sedona, famous for its vibrant red rock formations, a sinkhole can open with dramatic suddenness. How does such a collapse happen in a land defined by its arid, rugged landscape? The secret lies in the rare but powerful desert rains. When a heavy storm arrives, the water does not soak gently into the hard-packed surface. Instead, it rushes across the ground in a torrent, seeking any crack or fissure. This runoff funnels into the earth, disappearing into the subsurface where it begins to dissolve the very bedrock, a layer of soluble limestone or sandstone hidden beneath the dry soil. Over centuries, this slow, intermittent process carves out hidden caverns and tunnels. The desert surface appears solid and immutable, a vast, dry shield, but it is merely a thin crust over this secret, dissolving world. When the ceiling of one of these hidden voids can no longer support the weight, the desert floor gives way, creating a sinkhole that seems to defy the very logic of the dry climate. These collapses reveal that the power of water, even when it falls only occasionally, can shape the land in profound and sudden ways, proving that no environment, no matter how seemingly stable or dry, is completely immune to the ground giving way. A crack in a foundation can be more than a simple repair. It can be the first sign of a financial abyss. In Florida, the ground's instability created a parallel crisis in the world of insurance, a complex battle between homeowners, insurers, and the very earth itself. This all began in earnest after a series of highly publicized sinkhole disasters, which forced the state to mandate that all homeowners' insurance policies include a specific provision for catastrophic ground cover collapse. This sounds straightforward, but the definition became a legal minefield. For a claim to be paid, the damage had to meet a very strict criteria, often requiring a property to be officially condemned and uninhabitable, with a clear separation from the main structure. This left a vast gray area of lesser damage, what the industry calls sinkhole activity, which includes subtle signs like hairline cracks in walls or sticking doors that suggest the ground is shifting but has not yet fully given way. The result was a constant tug of war. Homeowners, terrified of their house being swallowed, filed claims for every minor crack. Insurance companies, facing a deluge of expensive claims, often denied them, arguing the damage was merely cosmetic or due to poor construction. This contentious environment became a breeding ground for fraud. Unscrupulous public adjusters and contractors would go door to door in vulnerable neighborhoods, using scare tactics to convince homeowners they had a sinkhole, then submitting inflated or even entirely fabricated repair estimates to the insurance companies. The most common scheme involved a process called underpinning, a legitimate but incredibly costly repair where crews drive massive concrete or steel piers deep into the stable bedrock beneath a home to permanently stabilize it. While necessary in true cases, fraudulent operators would prescribe this multi-$100,000 solution for problems that simply did not exist, draining insurance reserves and driving up premiums for everyone in the state. The legislative response was a roller coaster. Lawmakers repeatedly stepped in, trying to refine the definitions, curb the fraud, and stabilize the insurance market. They created a state-run insurer of last resort, Citizens Property Insurance, which quickly became one of the largest homeowners insurers in Florida, a clear indicator of how the private market was struggling with the risk. Each new law shifted the balance of power, sometimes giving more leverage to insurers, other times offering more protection to policyholders. The impact on the real estate market was profound. A home with a known sinkhole claim, even if fully repaired, saw its value plummet, often becoming nearly impossible to sell. Disclosure laws required sellers to reveal any past geological activity, turning a property's history into a permanent scarlet letter. The very phrase sinkhole claim could kill a deal instantly, as buyers feared future instability and the nightmare of securing insurance. This created a strange duality in Florida's housing market, where two identical houses could have vastly different values based solely on a line in a geological report. The entire economy of entire counties became intertwined with the stability of the limestone beneath them, a constant reminder that the true cost of a sinkhole is not just the dirt and rock that vanishes, but the trust in the very ground you buy and build upon. These dramatic stories all begin with a simple, invisible process. Deep beneath the surface, in regions rich with carbonate rock like limestone, a slow chemical dance is underway. Rainwater, which is naturally slightly acidic, soaks into the ground. As it percolates downward, it dissolves the soluble bedrock molecule by molecule. Over centuries, this persistent trickle carves out vast networks of underground tunnels and caverns, creating a Swiss cheese landscape hidden from view. The ground above this developing cavity is held up by a fragile roof of soil and rock, a ceiling that remains perfectly stable until it is not. The final collapse can be triggered by something as simple as a heavy rainstorm that adds just enough weight, or a change in the water table that removes the buoyant support. This fundamental process, however, manifests in three distinct ways, each with its own unique signature. The most terrifying and dramatic is the cover collapse sinkhole. This is the kind that swallows houses and Corvettes without warning. In this scenario, the hidden cavity has a ceiling made of a cohesive layer of clay. This clay acts like a bridge, holding the surface world aloft long after the supporting rock below has been completely dissolved. This creates an overhang, a dome of unsupported earth that can persist for years. When the stress finally overcomes the clay's strength, the entire roof gives way at once, collapsing into the void below in a sudden, catastrophic event. It is this type of sinkhole that creates those startling, sheer-walled pits. A much slower, more subtle cousin is the cover subsidence sinkhole. Here, the material above the cavity is not cohesive clay but loose, sandy soil. As the underlying limestone dissolves and small cavities form, the sand above gently trickles downward, filling the voids from the bottom up. This causes the ground surface to settle or subside in a gradual, bowl-shaped depression. You would not see a dramatic hole, but you might notice a pond forming where one never was before, or fences and roads developing a persistent, gentle sag over many months or years. The third and most common type is the dissolution sinkhole. This forms where the limestone is actually exposed at the land surface, with little or no soil covering it. Water simply pools on the rock and slowly widens natural joints and cracks, creating a shallow, saucer-like depression that grows over geologic time. These are often the least dangerous, but they are the starting point for the entire process, the first sign that the rock below is actively being dissolved. Understanding these mechanics transforms every crack in a foundation or every new pond from a simple nuisance into a potential clue. It reveals that the ground is not a static slab, but a dynamic, living system where water is the constant, patient sculptor. The very weather patterns that shape our world are now intensifying the hidden forces beneath it. A warming climate is not just melting ice and raising seas, it is actively priming the ground for collapse. The link between a hotter planet and more frequent sinkholes is becoming terrifyingly clear, especially in vulnerable regions like Florida. The mechanism is brutally simple, it all comes down to water. As global temperatures climb, the atmosphere can hold more moisture, leading to a higher frequency of extreme torrential downpours. These are not gentle rains, but sudden, intense deluges that dump massive amounts of water onto the ground in a very short time. This overwhelming surge of water does not soak in slowly. Instead, it floods into the existing cracks and fissures in the limestone bedrock, acting like a high-pressure acid wash. The slightly acidic rainwater aggressively dissolves the rock at an accelerated pace, rapidly widening small cavities into large voids. It is like speeding up a movie of geological erosion, compressing a process that normally takes centuries into just a few decades. Furthermore, the sheer weight of all that pooled water on the surface adds immense stress to the already fragile roofs of these hidden caves, pushing them closer to the breaking point. For coastal communities, the threat is twofold. Rising sea levels, a direct consequence of climate change, are pushing salty ocean water inland, infiltrating the freshwater aquifers. This saltwater is far more chemically aggressive than freshwater at dissolving limestone. As the saltwater wedge moves further underground, it can rapidly corrode the bedrock from below, destabilizing vast areas that were once considered stable. Imagine the entire foundation of a coastal city being slowly bathed in a corrosive brine, silently weakening its structural integrity from the inside out. The result is a perfect storm for sinkhole formation. We are likely to see not only more collapses, but larger and more unpredictable ones appearing in areas previously thought to be safe. This emerging reality forces us to see sinkholes not just as random acts of geology, but as potential markers of our changing climate, a direct and dramatic consequence of the planet's fever playing out beneath our streets and homes. The randomness of a sinkhole's appetite can be both terrifying and strangely absurd. These chasms do not discriminate, claiming the mundane and the monumental with equal indifference. In a moment of sheer, dark comedy, a man in Pennsylvania learned this firsthand while using a portable toilet at a fairground. Without warning, the ground beneath the flimsy structure gave way, plunging both the man and his temporary restroom into a 15-foot deep sinkhole. The rescue was as surreal as the accident itself, with firefighters carefully descending into the pit to extricate the bewildered and unharmed man from his porcelain prison. A truly unforgettable end to a day at the fair. That same chaotic randomness was on display in a Florida neighborhood where a swimming pool became the main course. The entire concrete shell, full of chlorinated water, simply dropped into the earth, creating a surreal tiled canyon in a suburban backyard. The pool was just gone, leaving behind a gaping wound lined with broken plumbing and shattered decking. The scale of what can vanish grew even larger when a fire station in Washington state found itself under siege from below. A massive sinkhole opened in the apparatus bay, its gaping maw swallowing the rear wheels of a fully loaded fire truck. The colossal red engine, a symbol of public safety, was left helplessly lodged in the concrete, its back end sinking into the void as if the earth itself had reached up to grab it. Perhaps the most sobering of these bizarre losses involved a final resting place. In a cemetery in Illinois, heavy rains triggered a collapse that undermined several burial plots. The result was a ghastly scene with multiple caskets partially exposed, some dislodged and teetering precariously on the raw edge of the freshly opened pit. The sanctity of the graveyard was violently broken, a stark reminder that not even the departed are safe from the ground's sudden betrayal. These stories of portable toilets and fire trucks, of swimming pools and caskets, highlight the profoundly indiscriminate nature of sinkholes. They are forces of pure geology, devoid of malice or intent, capable of turning our most ordinary moments and places into scenes of the extraordinary. The chaotic randomness of these collapses makes the quest to predict them one of modern geology's most urgent challenges. How do you forecast the opening of a void that can appear in seconds? Scientists are now deploying an arsenal of advanced technology to see into the ground before it gives way. One key tool is ground-penetrating radar, a system that works like an ultrasound for the Earth. It sends high-frequency radio pulses into the ground, which bounce back when they hit a change in material, like the open space of a cavity or a layer of saturated soil. By towing these units over large areas, researchers can create detailed subterranean maps, revealing the hidden honeycomb of tunnels and voids that signal future danger. From high above, another technology keeps a silent, constant watch. Satellite-based interferometric synthetic aperture radar, or INSAR, measures minute changes in the ground's elevation over time. By comparing radar images taken days or weeks apart, this system can detect a land surface that is subtly sinking or bulging, movements invisible to the human eye but that often precede a major collapse. This data can reveal the slow, initial subsidence that warns of a potential collapse sinkhole waiting to happen. Adding to this network are arrays of sensitive seismic monitors. These devices listen for the faint groans and cracks of the earth, the acoustic signals of rock fracturing and soil shifting deep below the surface. While predicting the exact moment of a collapse remains incredibly difficult, these tools are creating an early warning system. The challenge lies in the sheer complexity of the subsurface. A ground-penetrating radar might find a cavity, but it cannot always determine if the clay roof above it is strong enough to hold for another week or another decade. INSAR can show a neighborhood slowly sinking, but it cannot pinpoint which backyard will be the first to vanish. The goal is not to announce a sinkhole will open at a specific address next Tuesday, but to identify high-risk zones where the ground is actively unstable, allowing for proactive engineering surveys, targeted infrastructure repairs, and even controlled evacuations before a crisis occurs. This shift from reaction to anticipation could one day transform sinkholes from shocking disasters into managed geological events, saving both lives and the homes we believe are built on solid ground. The ground can take a home, but it cannot so easily erase the human will to endure. For the family of Jeff Bush in Seffner, the sinkhole that became a gravesite also forged an unbreakable bond of community support. In the wake of the tragedy, neighbors did not retreat in fear but drew closer, offering shelter, food, and a quiet, shared strength to a family that had lost everything in an instant. The profound grief was compounded by the psychological toll of the unpredictable, the knowledge that the very ground under their own homes held the same potential for silent betrayal. Yet from this trauma emerged a determination not to be defined by the collapse. The family, while forever marked by their loss, chose to advocate for stricter geological surveys and clearer disclosure laws, transforming their personal tragedy into a public mission to protect others. This spirit of resilience, of finding purpose in the rubble, echoes in the scattered community of Bayou Corne. For the 350 residents forced to abandon their homes, the collapse was not a single event but a slow, painful unraveling of an entire way of life. They lost not just houses but a shared history, the familiar sounds of the swamp, and the deep-rooted connections built over generations. The legal settlement provided financial compensation, but it could never restore the social fabric that was torn apart. Despite this, the people of Bayou Corne demonstrated a profound resilience. They supported one another through the protracted evacuation, forming a network of displaced neighbors who understood a loss that few others could comprehend. Their fight for accountability became a collective one, a battle not just for monetary damages but for recognition of the profound violation they had experienced. To live with the knowledge that the ground is not solid is to live with a low hum of existential anxiety. It reshapes your relationship with the world, turning a quiet street or a peaceful bayou into a landscape of potential threat. The true story of these 33 sinkholes is not just one of geological force, but of the human spirit that meets it. It is a story of communities that rally, of families that mourn and then mobilize, and of the stubborn refusal to let the earth have the final word. Your home feels safest when its foundations are solid, but what if they are not? Knowing how to react in the first moments of a sinkhole event can be the difference between a close call and a catastrophe. If you see the ground beginning to sag or hear a sudden, deep groaning from below, your first and only priority is to evacuate the area immediately. Do not stop to grab possessions and do not try to investigate the edge. Warn anyone else nearby to get to stable ground as quickly and calmly as possible. Once you are at a safe distance, call 911. Emergency responders are trained to secure the scene, evacuate neighboring properties, and assess the immediate danger. They will cordon off a large safety perimeter because an active sinkhole can grow without warning, swallowing more land in minutes. After the immediate threat is managed, your next call should be to your homeowner's insurance company and a licensed geotechnical engineer. Report the claim to your insurer right away, but understand that a geologist's official report is often required to confirm the cause of the damage. This expert will conduct soil tests and use ground-penetrating radar to determine if the collapse is truly a sinkhole and whether the ground around your property remains stable. Do not let an unqualified contractor diagnose the problem, as this is a specialized field requiring precise scientific analysis. The best defense, however, is recognizing the early warnings long before a chasm opens. Regularly inspect your property for subtle clues. Look for fresh, jagged cracks suddenly appearing in your home's foundation, exterior stucco, or interior drywall. Pay attention to doors and windows that suddenly become difficult to open or close for no apparent reason, as this can indicate the frame is warping from a shifting foundation. Outside, be alert for new, circular depressions in your yard, areas where rain pools unusually, or patches of grass that wilt and die because the soil beneath has collapsed and severed the roots. Even your fence posts or mailbox might start to visibly tilt. These signs do not automatically mean a sinkhole is forming, but they are a clear signal that the ground is moving and a professional opinion is needed. This knowledge turns fear into preparedness, giving you the power to act before the earth makes the decision for you. Every story of a collapsing street or a swallowed home shares a single, humbling truth. Our entire world is built upon a foundation that is alive with movement, a hidden landscape of dissolving rock and shifting water. From the priceless Corvettes in Kentucky to the lost neighborhoods of Louisiana, these 33 stories reveal a planet in constant, silent negotiation with itself. They underscore the awesome power of natural processes that operate on a timescale far beyond our own, and the profound fragility of the infrastructure we layer so confidently over the top. We have seen the bizarre twists of fate, like the one lucky car that escaped the museum, and the chilling randomness that can take a life or spare a house for no discernible reason. These are not isolated freaks of nature, but dramatic proof of the dynamic geological forces that shape our world, forces that are often completely invisible until the very moment they decide to announce themselves. The ground we walk on is not a passive slab, but a thin, active crust over a realm of caverns, rivers, and ancient, dissolving bones. It is a world that breathes, shifts, and occasionally opens an eye to the sky. So the next time you walk down your street or pull into your driveway, remember the unseen landscape just beneath your feet. What hidden stories lie under your own hometown? Share your tales of strange local phenomena or the ground that simply gave way in the comments below. The map of our world is not just what we see on the surface, but the vast, mysterious territory hiding directly below it.